is the Angel Next Door podcast, where we will talk about all things angel investing, what it is, who does it, how do we find them, what does it mean to invest in an early stage company. If you have ever wondered how you can affect the change you want to see in the world, then tune in to learn more. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Dr. Silvia Mah. Silvia is a great friend of mine and also a true inspiration when it comes to being an angel investor. Silvia has done a lot of different things in the angel investing space, including starting an accelerator called Stella Labs, and she'll tell us all about what an accelerator is. She is also the founder of Stella Angels, which is an angel group in order to support the companies that come out of Stella Labs. She's done everything from conferences to podcasts and really tried to educate women, especially, on what it means to be an angel investor and to back the companies that we want to see change in the world. She has a PhD and an MBA. She is a partner also at Ad Astria, and she's going to tell us a lot about why angel investing is so important to her and why it's important to have other people get into the game. So take a listen as we hear from Silvia as she tells us about all things angel investing in the San Diego area. Hi, Silvia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Marcia. I'm so excited.
I am so excited to have you on. As you know, we talk about early stage investing. We talk about people who've been angels before, who've never been angels before. What does it mean to be an angel investor? And you and I met probably, now like 6 years ago when you hosted us at for the Rising Tide Pilot Fund, which was so fun, and at the Stella Labs, which we're going to talk about. And we just had such a great time, totally hit it off, and got to see some amazing female entrepreneurs. So just start off by telling us a little about your background and what Stella Labs and Stella Angels is all about.
Yeah, so it's actually been awesome to know you for that long as well. I've seen you grow as well. So it's a mutual admiration society here of female angel investors that when we started 10 years ago, we were in the single digits of the numbers of female or the percentage of female angel investors in the United States. So I felt like, 10 years ago, even 8 years ago, when we met each other, we all had this responsibility, it felt like, to really make a difference, right? Yeah. If it meant to host somebody, or if it meant to do an access to capital event, or if it meant raising an accelerator, if it meant a small angel group that we put together. There were some people that wrote books, right? Of course, Alicia is the amazing leader of the book series of angel investment, but like Wing Pact Fund that was up in the Bay Area, all of these ladies were just doing so many great things that allowed us as female angel investors to have the confidence to go forward. So I'm Dr. Silvia Mah, and about 15 years ago, I started being an angel investor because I was working in the commercialization space at the University of California, San Diego, with commercializing university technologies, graduate students, postdocs, faculty. But I also definitely saw a dearth in the number of female founders and scientists that are raising startups. And again, on the other side, I didn't see enough female angel investors or investors in general that had this great camaraderie to invest in each other, to grow an ecosystem of powerful women. I always saw that, and working in this space, I was like, oh my gosh, there's this access to capital is something we need to face. But, as just an academic, I'm like, how am I going to do this? Got my MBA in strategy and startups at Rady School of Management, which they really focus on this startup ecosystem and how do you create it. So after I finished my MBA, I was either going to go back home and work for my dad, he's an entrepreneur, or kind of continue this commercialization thing. And at that time, my father passed away. And it was that time that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that he passed away. He was a very good entrepreneur, but I had this inheritance. And I said, you know what, I'm going to make an impact with this capital that I received, right? It's a blessing to me. I want to bless others. And again, as a servant leader, I wanted to do that. And then of course, marrying that with, wow, there is this impact that I can do in this female space. What can I do, right? What can I do to really make an impact? And that's how Stella Labs, which is a business accelerator for female entrepreneurs, got started as little labs, right? That's why it's called Stella Labs, little labs of idea potential lab. We had a marketing lab, we had a web developer lab, we had all these little labs. And then we created a whole accelerator after about a year into it, because people wanted that whole, like, how do you create a startup from beginning to end and not just, go into the verticals. They wanted the whole thing. And then that's how we created the accelerator. And at first it was any entrepreneur, and still to this day, it's any entrepreneur that's out there, but we've really tied into this access to capital piece of it as well. So we do our women's fast pitch that is nationwide now. So 10 years ago, we just did it in San Diego. Again, small little pieces of impact and action that everybody can take in their ecosystems, do it. Right. And that's kind of what we did about 10 years ago. And then now it's nationwide. COVID really helped us because we were able to say, we're going to do a virtual event, and everybody was okay with it. And we went nationwide, and it was really fun to have 6 regions across the nation last year. And then this year, 2021, we did the same regions: Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, Southeast, Midwest. And this year we added Alaska and Hawaii, because we knew that we didn't get any female entrepreneurs from those 2 states. So we said, you know what, we're going to carve out a specific ask for them. And we got great entrepreneurs from those 2 states, and they were able to pitch and gain some access to investors. And then on the other side, we also said, the other side of the venture table, as as the leader of Angel Capital Association, is that, we do need more female angel investors. And we know through work and data analysis and research by the ACA is that women investors invest 2 times as much in female entrepreneurs, right, when they are investors. So there is this direct line, a direct effect of activating new female angel investors in the ecosystem. So that's why we created Stella Angels. And over the years, we've been to ACA Summit every single year, right? That's been like our go-to, right? And I wasn't paid for this or anything. That's to say how awesome ACA is. But we did start with that. I started there, always brought my team along to learn even more, to connect with more angels. And we've just kind of been growing organically. Sometimes we were doing meetings every single month. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we just had access to capital events, but always growing this group of wonderful female investors, or women who are aspiring angel investors, who are like lawyers, or they've been in corporate for a very long time, but they don't know this investor world, and they're worried, they're not confident enough, they want a group. So we've just been kind of there all along. And then I hired Lauren Rowley in January of this year, and she was a Tech Coast Angels analyst and an MBA from Rady. So wonderful colleague from there. And we kind of evolved Stella Angels, what we are today, a very deep-rooted membership group of 15 ladies who meet on a quarterly basis to have access to capital events and to just kind of meet and be able to share our deal flow. So that's like what Stella Angels and Stella Labs is all about.
Amazing. Such amazing work you're doing, Silvia. It's incredible. So for our listeners, let's go back for a minute and talk about a couple of things. First, so when you talk about an accelerator and these labs, like, tell us, like, how does an entrepreneur even find out about it? What happens once they do? What's that all about?
Yeah. And I'll also make sure that I tie in what an angel investor can, help an accelerator. I'm going to kind of have that lens as well on there. So an accelerator is basically a place where entrepreneurs can come and get resources and education on raising their startups and their ideas. There are accelerators that are very early stage, like launch phase. Come in and launch your idea with us and grow with us. We'll give you some education. That's kind of like where Stella Labs is. It's more like a pre-accelerator in a technical term, right? But an accelerator is basically just that. You're accelerating a business, either that you're like pre-accelerator of saying that you are at a very early stage ideation of your startup, or you're going to go to an accelerator like Techstars or Y Combinator that actually you're farther along, your idea, you've done a little bit of research, you talked to a couple of customers, and you're going to go through this accelerator that either gets some equity, like usually it's like 4 to 5% equity into your business as an accelerator, and you get some funding from that accelerator. That's a little bit further along type of an accelerator model. There's other models that are venture studios. That's a venture group that says, I have an idea of democratizing this or having an impact on the world in this way. This is the idea that we have. And now we're going to hire a CEO, a CMO, a CSO, all of those, and put that together and then raise a startup. So that's another way of doing it. At Astra Ventures, where I'm also a partner at, we do a venture builder model. So we have startups that have been through the ideation phase through Stella Labs, right? Really early stage, go through that accelerator. Then they go through Ad Astra Venture Builder that we allow for the startups to come in. We get a certain percentage of their company and we build with them, right? We build the marketing that they need, the product development that they need. We are like their advisory council or advisory board on steroids, right? For about a year. So that's kind of like the breadth of what that looks like as an accelerator. And for angel investors out there, you can be mentors, advisors for these accelerator programs, because that really helps you get one-on-one time with entrepreneurs. They might not be the ones that you invest in, right? But they might be somebody that you're like, oh, I want to like kind of get to know this market or get to know the startups that are working in this space, this industry. And you can give of your time and be that servant leader in your ecosystem to give to an accelerator so that you can help them along. And sometimes you can invest in some of those businesses.
So yeah, I think it's so important that people know that angel investing is not all about money. You don't always have to be investing money. In fact, we were just talking about somebody a couple minutes ago that said, you said that, hey, they took 10 years to decide they were going to actually make an investment, but time, expertise, people's networks, that's what these companies really need, especially at these early stages. And sometimes angels don't even come into play until after they've been through an accelerator, and then they actually go out to get funding from outside sources, right?
Exactly. I was actually on a panel last week with Start Out Accelerator and Group. They have a summit, and we were on a panel with Lorene Pendleton, who's a wonderful active angel investor and board member of ACA in the past. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about the 3 C's, right? So financial capital, relational capital, and expertise capital, like network capital. So use your network, use your expertise, and use your funding as the 3 sources of capital that an investor can give to the entrepreneur or serve the entrepreneur. Because give sometimes it has that connotation of you're giving without a return. As an angel investor, you have to kind of think about your long-term financial goals, right? You're not doing it just for the good of things. Of course, there's impact there. And there's, again, we would talk about responsibility and stuff like that of an ecosystem, but you are trying to make some money out of it, but you also can give of yourself. You can give of your network and your expertise.
Absolutely. And we're definitely going to be talking about returns in just a minute, but you mentioned something else that I want to hit on. And that is, as women, we tend to want to know every single thing, every single detail before we'll make a decision, right? Men, they'll just be on the golf course and they'll say, buddy, and the buddy will say, hey, I heard about this cool company. Do you want to invest in it? And they're like, yeah. And they're texting each other like 10 minutes later about how much they're investing, right? But that's not how we work as women. Our brains are wired a lot differently. So you mentioned about confidence and what it takes. So tell us a little bit how Stella Labs and Stella Angels has helped to build women's confidence.
Yeah, great conversation here. I can talk for hours, but I'll try to be quick. I think also like even I get texts from you. I get texts from all of my female colleagues as well who are angel investors saying, hey, I'm working on this deal. Of course, we want to go into and see the due diligence because we have a fiduciary responsibility to our own funds to do that, right? But that confidence of knowing each other, I want to go back to my first angel investment that I ever did. I had just gone through the 37 Angels education with Angela Lee. And I had the education. I went through it. Of course, I already had my PhD and my MBA. Hello, Silvia. You have enough like brain power to make the decision. I was making a decision on a company that was in the life science space. So I completely understood the science. It was super cool to be able to talk to the founder. And it was a male, but it was in the female space. And I told him, I said, your first hire for your CEO, it needs to be a woman. And we're going to write it down somewhere. As an early stage investor myself, I want that. Right. And so we had a great discussion, and sure enough, he hired a female CEO, and now they have a female led team, which was amazing. That's the power of a female angel investor at a very early stage. So that's another conversation in and of itself. But going back to the confidence of a woman investor, all of that was in my favor. I understood the due diligence. I understood the science. I understood the business because I had just, finished my MBA. I just finished the 37 Angels course, but I had to call up Angela and say, this is my first check. What do I do? Like, I don't know. I'm scared. I don't know. Like, how much should all of this, right? And she goes, you have it all. What do you want to do? What is your gut telling you? I'm like, well, my gut is telling me I have to write the check. My gut is saying this amount. And she goes, go for that because you've already done all that cerebral stuff. You have to trust your gut. So that was a big turning point in and of itself. I remember so vividly that day and what we were talking about in that conversation. So with that theme, right, of why I wrote that first check is what we built this whole kind of Stella Nation or Stella impact that we've had is that we say, okay, that woman investor needs to have education and resources, right? We're a proud ACA member. We give them education on a monthly and quarterly basis by having meetings virtually, obviously through COVID, but we had you come in and talk to them. We have other women come in and talk about valuation. If they have a question, we listen to the women that are part of our network and give them that education because women, a part of it is actually sitting down and actually doing the work and having this education and looking at workshops like the ACA has. But it's also about this relational capital and relational connection with others. So at Stella Angels, we make sure that there's education and then there's a relationship build because that confidence is super important to say, okay, am I okay? Am I protected, right? We're nurturers in and of itself, right? As women, we're very relational as well. So typically, historically, we have gone away from that and say, okay, that's separate than a man's transactional business self. We should lean into that relational business self as us as women and say that's what actually makes us really strong. And that relational piece is oh, let's talk to each other. Let's talk about a deal that we're going through. Are we okay with it? Right. So that example of the woman who took about 10 years to decide on her first check was a lot about relational building. She was part of our membership group over so many years. She's come to so many events, so many, monthly things and kind of got part of this ecosystem and saw others doing what they were doing, seeing other people write checks, asking them questions. How did it feel? Right. Not just the details, but how did it feel? It felt good. Okay, great. Have you had a return? Well, not really. How does that make you feel? Oh, a little bit edgy, but you know what? It's good for this and this and this. It's going to pay off in the long term. So all of those small questions are the things that we never get to ask anybody. We don't have the golf course. I say that we have the nail salon at times, to ask questions, but we don't have that. So we need to build that. So that's why these organizations like ACA and other female angel groups are so important. Not because, let's say, we get a lot of questions about our angel group. It's well, we have Tech Coast Angels here in San Diego, huge angel group, great. Go do them if you like that. But also Stella Angels is a great segue into having those conversations as well with other female angel groups. And then the other piece that we've created at Stella is that we have our Women's Venture Summit every year in September. So that is really focused on creating bridges between female entrepreneurs and female investors. We really focus on the female investor year after year after year after year, because we know that the more that we can build their confidence and having those connections with other female investors, that might be the same of them or might be different from them, but having those conversations that are sometimes more tactical, but sometimes more relational, that's what you need, that balance between those two. Those are the things that we've seen over the years that work for the female investor psyche to be activated and then to actually activate and write that check. So those are the things that we learned in the last 10 years that we've been able to build upon.
I love it. Okay, so we've been talking about returns. Now, angel investing is certainly not something like the stock market where you can make an investment and immediately have liquidity. Like you could go to the stock market, you could buy a share of Apple stock, and a minute later you could sell it. So angel investing, we call it patient capital because you end up writing a check and then it can be years or longer, many, many years before you see a return. So one of the things that I think is really important is to talk about the types of returns that there are out there, financial returns. We talk a lot about it's great. You really should be doing angel investing for a lot of different reasons. But again, we do like to see financial returns. So I know that over the summer, you happen to have quite a nice exit that gave you quite a nice return. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the exit that I had as an angel investor is Eucora. It is a UTI drink mix that over the years they just had the drink mix is like just put it into some water and you drink it after anything that causes you to get an UTI. But now they have a whole slew of probiotics and all of these things. So they got to the point that they had the revenue that they needed to be able to sell to a company that makes nature made vitamins. So really great exit. I cannot disclose publicly how much that was, but it was a good exit in multiple different ways. One, obviously, financial return for the investors, very, very good, right? But then also a really great testament to making sure that there is a values alignment between the startup and the acquirer, right? Because they had a really great conversation about how do we grow this? It's in the right space, the right company to sell into. And as an investor myself, I'll kind of go through a little bit of the tactical pieces that allowed us to make sure that, we were investors in Eucora and be able to have the exits that we had over the summer. So as an accelerator, right, we have an access to capital event. So that was Innovate Her about 5 years ago. So I'm giving you some time because you were asking about the time frames. So
Right.
about 5 years ago, we had this competition, Innovate Her. And as an accelerator, that's what we talked about just a while ago, is that become a mentor or a judge for an accelerator because you get in front of these wonderful entrepreneurs at a very early stage, right? And you have some vetting there because we have, as an accelerator, we put out a call. We get, at that point, it was about 80 to 100 applications. We dwindle it down to 4 of the best. And then those 4 get to pitch in front of judges that are typically angel investors, right? And then so Eucora won our small pitch competition in San Diego. I wrote like a mini due diligence piece, sent it to the SBA nationwide. She got picked top 10 in the nation. So obviously this is dwindling down of the best. And she was the only one in California. So just imagine Silicon Valley and San Diego. She was the only one in California that was picked. And I think it was like 500 plus sites across the nation that were part of this competition. She goes to the national SBA, and she wins, right? The competition. So amazing. And then she got some non-dilutive capital from Sarah Blakely Foundation. So I'm seeing these things because as an angel investor, we're always worried about traction. Like, how do we pick the right things? And when back then, you don't know that they're going to have an exit, 5-7 years later, right? And you want that return, but how do you track these things? So obviously she had great non-dilutive capital to be able to execute on some things. She had some validation from the ecosystem that she won a competition, she won a national competition, really great things. So that caused me to say, hey, you know what? We're starting this bigger accelerator called Ad Astra Ventures, and we take a little bit of equity and we actually fund you as a true angel investment. So she says, great. We had about 25 applications at that time, very small amount of applications. We only took 3 to go through our accelerator. And again, more resources, more education for the entrepreneur. And we had mentors that were also investors. And then after that, I invested in her individually, right, as an angel investor. So you're kind of seeing all of these themes of like, as an investor, getting involved in the ecosystem, an accelerator, getting more involved as an angel investor. Ad Astra Ventures is just 3 investors that are put together, and we invest in female-led businesses through an accelerator model and a fund model. That's a little bit of a micro VC look at it, but just kind of giving you that framework. And then I invested individually in her after all of these milestones happened. I was able to say, yes, I want to invest in her. And now 5-7 years later, she scaled, she did amazing. I was able to have great conversations with her over the years, advise her at different inflection points and milestones to be able to have her have some experience that I could bring to her, but she's the one who drove the ship and she drove it to exit. So I wanted to kind of peel all those pieces out because that's the beauty of being an angel investor, and it does pay off, right? And of course, we always say like 1 in 10 survive. As a female angel investor who's investing in awesome female entrepreneurs, I want 9 out of 10 survive. So that's what we always talk about, right? Is we invest in more of the zebras. She only did 1 more round of funding right at the time, right after I invested in her really early. So she only wanted 1 more round. And then she goes, you know what? I'm going to do the revenue that I want to do and hit so that I can actually not have to ask for any more investment. So that was really exciting. And that's something to talk about as you're angel investing and going forward, because, maybe some things are multiple rounds of funding after you, and that's okay. That's part of the portfolio theory, is some of them are like that. And some of them are just 1 step passed you a small raise and they're off to the races, and then they sell, which those are the kinds of things that I know that everybody learns at ACA of portfolio theory. How do you do that? How do you create an ecosystem? How do you give back to your ecosystem? How do you track traction? And how do you invest and write that first check? So hopefully that answered kind of like the question of what happened, and then also how did that work with my angel investor journey?
That's amazing. And we often hear entrepreneurs tell us, hey, we're not going to have to raise any more money after this round. And in a lot of cases, that's not necessarily true. They usually do have to go and raise more money. So that's kind of amazing that she only had that one round and then was able to grow the company. So awesome. And it does really make a difference when you have a big exit. Kind of restores your faith in what we're doing from a financial perspective with angel investing. I know I had one last year myself, so it's pretty.
It does restore. And we were talking before the podcast is that, to be able to have a return like that you're like, hey, it actually made sense. And because you give of yourself so much as an investor, you just heard the journey, right? As I led that accelerator. I wasn't just a mentor, right? But just anybody who's working in the ecosystem, it takes a lot of servanthood and lots of hours to do what we do. And when we do have that return, it does like restore that faith in like, what are you doing, right? What are you doing every single day? Because it's such a long horizon for that return. It's going to happen. That adrenaline of impact and serving others is great. But know that there is a financial return at the end for the ones that actually make it. And that is a significant amount because you invested in a very early stage. I actually want to go back to, like you said, about patient capital. If you do want those returns to come back, think about that values alignment of the entrepreneur, because she really toed the line on values alignment and impact, right, of every single investor that she brought in and the exit strategy that she had. So those are the kinds of things that I really love, that this worked really, really well. And I think that if we have that kind of conversation from beginning to end, we do have that return that comes back in a very incredible way, right? That we were able to really know that there's a return to what we're doing.
And you were probably one of her most hardworking angel investors, and she was part of the accelerator, and the accelerator ended up getting some piece of equity as well. And then I'm sure she had other angels that weren't really that involved at all in the company. And all of a sudden, one day got a phone call, hey, you're getting a check in the mail. So
yeah. And all of that is good. I don't think it's bad or good or whatever. It's just you do what you can as an investor. And when you do think about this patient capital, because it is a long horizon, you have to think that way. What can you do to help that entrepreneur and your investor group to make that happen, right? So like just growing an ecosystem that she was able to get investment from San Diego investors and SoCal investors, that means that our whole ecosystem is growing and all of us are playing a piece of that, right? Even like the people who were, small investors, just writing that check makes a difference.
It absolutely does. And I love hearing about areas outside of Silicon Valley, outside of New York City, that are booming and developing entrepreneurial ecosystems, because at the end of the day, we have to back the companies that are making the change that we want to see in the world. And not all of them are going to be in these big hubs. So Silvia, thank you so much for being on the show. You are a true inspiration to women and all angel investors out there.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me part of the show.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for listening. To connect with me, visit my website at marciadawood.com. And if you're looking to learn more about investing in the changes that you want to see in the world, sign up for Ann and Bill Payne's ACA Angel University classes. You go to angelcapitalassociation.org, all one word, to find out the schedule. Many classes are offered, everything from the angel investing basics, fundamentals, risks, due diligence, term sheets, valuations, returns and portfolio strategy. And for a deeper dive, there are advanced classes which include capitalization tables, startup boards, and exit strategies. If you're not already a member of the Angel Capital Association, you can become one for the low price of $295 for the year, and that will give you unparalleled access to discounts, free webinars with a huge archive of content, networking opportunities, and much more. We'd love to have you join us. All content for this website is informational and not intended to serve as legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. while Marcia, that's me, does serve on the SEC Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee, my views are my own and not the views of the SEC or my fellow colleagues on the committee. Our speakers and hosts are thoughtfully selected for their educational value, but their opinions are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the host, me, or the Angel Capital Association, and neither specifically endorse the use of presenters' products or services. Listeners of the podcast should consult their own tax, investing, legal, or accounting advisors before making important financial decisions. All warranties, including accuracy, completeness, and suitability for specific purpose, are disclaimed.